financing. Use it very wisely. So my first money, and this is something I hadn't realized how incredible until the Zipcar case was written, and I had to think back. I put the first cars on the road, and I had only raised $75,000 and spent it. So the first $50,000 was from a classmate from business school, who I invited over to my house just for advice, because she had done a startup and she had recently sold it. So we were sitting around the dinner table talking about this, and we're having coffee at the end, and she turns to her husband and says, "Why don't we invest? Should we invest in Robin's company?" The reason I'm telling this story is these angel investors, individual investors, you never know where that money is going to come from. The Zipcar business case, the first day it was presented, first day it was taught to this class. I'm just speaking to them like I'm speaking to you. After the class, one of the students emailed me and said he had founded and sold a company and was now attending Harvard Business School, and he invested in Zipcar. So it came from a collection of friends, family, and some small venture funds, and it is so hard to do that afterward I feel you are constantly networking, and there's many paths, and each person tells you to talk to 3 other people, and all the paths not taken, of course, are behind you, and you forget about them. But it's a very difficult process, and I raised $1.3 million to begin with for the first round of financing from this very broad group of people and institutions, and then I raised another 2 and another 7. So what I want to say is it's really hard, and what's remarkable about a startup is that you can and should be doing so much for, you personally have to know how to do a lot of things, so I didn't pay myself for a very long time, and I'm a very clever person who can do all sorts of things. So I was writing the copy for the website, I was doing the marketing, I was getting leases, I was talking to the banks, I was selling the business plan. So I hired almost no one, very few people, and we did a lot of it on equity, that the engineers, which is where all my money went to engineers, and we ran out of that very quickly, and so then I had to give them equity. And then I did it with loans, bridge loans with investors. So the price of the company wasn't set, that they gave me money and they would get a 20% premium on the final round of financing. So torture is what I want to say. So when you get the money, you spend it incredibly wisely, because you give your life up for it. Any other questions? Yeah? They do all these nice things. Here are these good stories about our customers. I've told you some of the stories. Yet there are some jerks. And so then we had penalties for the jerks. And so if you returned the car late, you would get a penalty. There was a $500 deductible for a car accident, so that everyone still felt their neck was on the line. They had some skin in the game, we say, so they had something to lose if they got into a car accident. The next person that comes to the car sees the condition the car is in and picks up the phone and says, "Hey, I don't want to get in trouble for this dent. Someone else did it," and so they report it. So indeed, a very small percentage of the people lie and try to get away with things. But mostly, the vast bulk don't. So that small percentage is built into the revenue model, but it's a very small percentage. It honestly is. And I have to tell you, to the dead body story, wait, this is so, and so one of the stories I want to write when I write my life memoirs is I have this, around the startup, I have this dreams and nightmares story I want to tell. And one of my nightmares was that there was a dead body in one of the Zipcars. And all my staff were saying, "Robin, there's a dead body in the Zipcar in this parking lot." And I was saying, "Well, go get it out." And no one would get it out. And I'm saying, "Okay, if you guys aren't going to get the dead body out, I'll go get the dead body out." So I go to the Zipcar, and now, of course, it's a dream. And so my children are with me in the car, and so I'm driving the car with the dead body to go take the dead body to wherever you take dead bodies to. And what was really hard for me while this was happening was my children were saying, "Mom, why is there a dead body in the car?" And then a policeman comes and stops us, and I'm having to explain to the policeman it's not my dead body. And my children think she's being caught by the policeman, that she's now a murderer. But why this story happened is, and here's another tale of entrepreneurship, is this idea of Zipcar was one that came from my co-founder. She's the German who sat in the cafe and saw it. And the very first time she told me about Zipcar, we shook hands across the table and said 50-50. And this is what I recommend you do not personally. So anyway, that was the story of that. Yes?
How many of your cars are hybrid vehicles? And do you find that environmentally conscientious customers are more inclined to you?
So the question was that, number one, how many out of the 6,500 car fleet that you have, how many of them are hybrids? And do you find that more environmentally conscious individuals are attracted to your product?
I'll talk at the Dartmouth School of Environment, Forestry, and I actually had my first person ever shout at me from the audience, "You're a liar," because she was saying that I was claiming that my company was environmental, yet we weren't using all electric vehicles, and what a horrible thing. I wasn't a liar, and I'm not a liar, and the reason, which I explained to you around the pricing model, is that it doesn't matter one bit what kind of car you would put in there, and in fact, I would tell my staff, we could put a Hummer in there, I don't care, because what really matters is that the pricing strategy makes them drive less. So the environmental gain is dramatically around the reduction of miles, very much less with the per miles of the car. Like that doesn't matter. And we do have many Priuses, in fact. So we had 2 electric cars very early on that Toyota had given us. And what's striking about those 2 electric cars is they were the last 2 cars to be taken out of the city ever. So people would reserve every other car before they would reserve the plug-in electric. The hybrids, people drive those all the time. They're fabulous. I can't tell you what % of the fleet is hybrid today, and I feel it doesn't matter. And from a marketing perspective, what was key to marketing and a competitor that we beat out, one competitor had just one kind of car, and all the cars were that kind of car. And if you're just going to have one kind of car, well, then you just drive your own car. I mean, one of the big assets of our car is that you can have all these different kinds. So it's the diversity of the fleet that really is compelling from a marketing standpoint, and the environmental piece, as I say. So no, and very importantly, we didn't market it as an environmental thing. We marketed it as the smart, urban, cool, hip service. And recently, times have changed, and the company is using a little more of that environmental aspect. I used to say it was item number 4. That was the 4th reason that you would choose the company. And when I think about environmental services, in general, we need, while I deeply want us to be providing those, the quality needs to be the same. I mean, people need to do it for a positive value that's not counted. Other questions? Guys, yes?
Have you ever thought of bringing your company into any stock exchange?
Bring it to where?
Stock exchange. Into listing your company.
And I own a very small percentage, probably less than 1%. So when you do have a startup that requires a lot of technology and capital investment, you lose out. And when you start going to venture money or angel investors, the whole question is, what's the exit strategy? How are we going to get our money out of it? And I always laugh at this question. I think, well, there's only 2 possible ways. So I can make up something, but either you're acquired or you go public. And so that's what I would always say, oh, we'll be acquired or we will go public. My successor as CEO, I feel like he missed an opportunity 3 years ago to go public because he wanted to buy our arch rival competitor, and so he bought the competitor. Then he had to assimilate the companies. He didn't sell to a number of people who wanted to buy, and now that window has changed. So we will either be bought or we'll go public, and hopefully the markets will turn and the public markets will turn, and that will happen. Other questions? Yeah?
Yes, you were doing your
Is that the initial conception was so on target that today, 10 years later, this company is 90% as conceived and as we executed. However, when we think about startups, I do tell people, and it happens all the time, is that you constantly have to be a learning organization and getting feedback. One of the attributes that you, as a small company, have over a big company is that you can change very quickly and you can gather information very quickly. So it's one of the big assets that you have. And so many startups, their business model or their market or what they deliver changes. And to this piece around founders, that's why you should never make the handshake across the table, because you don't know whose skills and what will become important over time. That will change. So problems. A problem I describe often, and that was, I'd say, one of the low points of the company, was to give you the time frame and the pace in which we did this. So I incorporated the company in January of 2000. I put the first cars on the market in June of 2000. And I was closing on financing in November of 2000. So I worked for 9 months without serious financing. So we launched in June. By September, we had a lot of people using a lot of cars. So I had enough data to compare it to my business model. So, and this was when we were still, there was a lot of manual work. So in the middle of October, I had the person that was working with me on this, we had the data, and we crunched the numbers, and it came out that the amount of utilization we had on cars was producing about half the amount of revenue the business model said it was supposed to produce. And I was 2 weeks away from closing on $1.3 million. So I heard this news. We were still working out of my house. I went into my bedroom, shut the doors, the curtains were drawn, and I cried for about an hour. And I thought, oh my God, I'm selling something that is never going to work. People are trusting me. They're giving me their money. This is the worst day. I'm ruining my entire reputation. How am I going to tell people this is never going to work? Then I pulled myself back out of my bedroom and into the other bedroom that was the excess capacity where we were doing our office. And we went and looked back at the business model very, very closely. And what I'm going to tell you was the problem seems obvious, but the piece I want to tell you about a startup is there are thousands of details, and all these details are new. You have to address every detail. So as the startup grows, you start firming up many issues and they get behind you. But the thing that we had screwed up is when I was figuring, when I was modeling utilization with revenue, I had counted hourly utilization the same as a daily utilization. People can rent by the hour or by the day, but a daily rate is not 24-hour, 1-hour rates. Does that make sense? So when I was doing it, I hadn't taken into account this mix. My daily rate was dramatically too low. And we had come out, this is in the 2000, we came out with a daily rate of, I think, I want to say $45 a day, and that was too low. And remember, everything's included, insurance and gas. So this is another learning point around being a fast learner, and when things are broken, fix them as quickly as possible. So my staff advised me I needed to raise that rate by at least 20%. And I'd only been in business for 3 months, and we had 450 people who are now members. So my staff were telling me, Robin, you can't raise that rate. People have sold their cars. They've only just joined. You established a pledge and promise with them. You can't change the rate by 20%. And I thought, how in heck can I ever do a business model that's broken? This is, I can keep going forward and we'll lose money for the rest of our lives, or I can make this cut now. So I remember I had been emailing our members, and I had created this very good relationship with them. So I emailed and I said, you know what? I made a mistake. This price point for the daily rate is too low. I have to raise it to $50, $55 a day. So I wrote this email that was just laying it out. And I have to say, I pushed the button and it went out to the 450 members at 6 p.m. that night. And I walked home so dejected, you know, but I felt I didn't have a choice. And when I walked into work the next morning, walking to work dreading what I was going to be seeing, the